Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana is set to deliver the national budget speech for the fiscal year 2024 to 2025 on Wednesday. Minister Godongwana will outline all the financial, economic and social commitments that the government will prioritise in its planned expenditure. Minister Godongwana will provide a detailed plan for 2024 spending, including proposals for the revenue collection in order to help fund government's planned interventions and commitments. He's also expected to introduce the Appropriation Bill and table the Division of Revenue Bill, which Parliament will process in the following months. Now, on Thursday last week, President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered the SONA, or at least 2 weeks ago, where he outlined the national government's plans to tackle the country's energy crisis and other socio-economic challenges. And to look at what's likely to come out of this week's budget speech, we joined virtually now by Senior Economist at PWC South Africa, Xhanti Payi. Xhanti, good to have you with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to the viewers.
So, we were saying off air, every year we say this is going to be this is perhaps the most important budget speech that we've heard. But at this time around, can we really say that, given what's happening on the political landscape and the fact that we may just see a change of guard or not?
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly where you hit it on the mark. I mean, it's an election year. And whereas I think in previous years, the government is able, for example, to take a tough stance where you may find, that, you want to manage budgets, may want to remove some projects and keep some others. It's going to be very hard for the minister this year to underspend, as it were, or to lower spending, or to even try and consolidate, as we usually call it, because there are so many needs, so many pressing needs. I mean, you must know, we have had the COVID grant, and many people have made calls for that COVID grant to continue to be sustained and even converted into a basic income grant. And there are things like that. So there's a lot of needs for infrastructure, education. So we have to spend on health, and we talk about the NHR, that also at some point needs to be funded in order to be developed. So there's a lot of needs. But at a time when collection of revenue has underperformed, we've got a deficit problem that's coming that the minister must also work on.
So it's the collection of revenue, and that, of course, Xhanti, is a big one, because where is the money going to come from to fund whatever it may be, whether it's an ANC manifesto that will be implemented, or a DA one, or an EFF one? They all require money. So given what's happening with revenue collection, what would the minister be very wary of in delivering this particular budget speech?
So he knows that he only has three sources of money. The first one is tax. The second one is borrowing. I guess those are the two ones. And what happens is that over the past year, we struggled to collect a lot of tax because, sectors in the corporate income tax itself has been under pressure. We know the mining sector has been a lot under pressure because of the issues that we know in logistics and trade and all of that. We also know that the economy hasn't been growing, so many businesses have not been doing well, and so they will not be able to pay the kinds of taxes they've been able to pay. Consumers themselves have seemed to be a little bit more resilient, so there's something there. And then there's also that he has to. And so he's going to think about where does he actually raise the money from on that before he goes borrowing. Because remember, also his ability to borrow is constrained because we're trying to manage our debt, which has skyrocketed. And he's made the promise that debt must be kept at its lowest. So at some point, he probably has to increase either that or personal income tax. And that's going to be a very difficult choice. Of course, if you are going into elections and you make South Africans unhappy by actually increasing their taxes, that may actually be something that backfires. So that's a very difficult decision that he has got to make. But it is one that's probably inevitable. Because if he borrows all of that, then our debt starts to increase. If our debt starts to increase, then investors will start to distrust us because they'll start to worry that our debt problem may be insurmountable. And they start to worry about things like default. Remember, he also told us last year that out of every rand he raises, he spends almost 20 cents on paying interest on that debt. And that's a huge amount of money. And so whether or not then our budgets are effective. Because, I mean, if you collect all this money and you use so much of it to finance the debt, it tells you something is going awry.
Indeed, it does. And then perhaps just to exacerbate it further, Xhanti, Treasury estimates tax revenue shortfall over the next 2 financial years of 121.1 billion. So how then will government reduce its debt service costs? And these are already now the biggest item on the budget. So what are they going to do?
If I had that answer, I would be Minister of Finance. But I think that that he has to borrow. So borrowing is without a doubt part of it. And then the second part is really trying to manage taxes. Hopefully, if we think about it, is that he can maybe get some of it in a way. Because remember, if you increase that, then of course what you do is also increase prices. Because that becomes then, because any percentage point on that goes directly to the cost of the goods. And any time when the consumer is under pressure, any time when we are trying to manage inflation, that's a very difficult choice to do. Then, of course, you can think about consumers, but already consumers are under pressure. So if you take anything from our incomes, you also put us in a precarious condition. And I think a lot of the problems also is when we think about the effectiveness of how we use our taxes. We know a lot of our taxes leak. I mean, that just the other day, we were being told by the Auditor General that there's a lot of money that's being misused, used outside of what it was pledged to be used for, and wasted, as she said. So all of these things are starting to actually trouble the population. So we keep giving you money, and you misuse it or you waste it, and why should we actually be happy that you are increasing taxes? And of course, when we're going into an election year, that will be a consideration for voters. And so really, it's a very, very, very difficult one for this year. On top of the fact that, given that kind of limitation, is that you must make sure he spends on key items that are going to make voters happy. So I don't know, it's going to be great.
It's going to be a tough one. And just very briefly, Xhanti, as we run out of time, our debt to GDP ratio. And you look at how that has just, sharply increased over the last few years. If you think about the fact that in the 2017-18 year, our debt to GDP ratio was 53.3%, sitting at 70.9%. That's a very sharp increase in, quite a short period of time.
Absolutely. In 2008, it was 25%. It's now 3 times that amount. And then you ask yourself, okay, where has that money gone? Has it been building infrastructure? Has it been building roads? Has it been, invested in energy? All of the big items that we want our money to be spent on so that it actually inspires growth. Because remember, one of the things also the finance minister does is that he says, okay, I will borrow some of this money because we have to invest for growth. Because that's where we'll be able then to raise more taxes, is when the economy is growing, and therefore more and more of us are able to pay, and more of us are able to pay more because we are making more money, whether you're a business or whether you're an individual, because you are becoming more prosperous. And we need to find ways of building a prosperous society that can actually continue to pay tax. We need to get people employed so that they can also be part of the tax base. And that, in this budget, has to come out. It has to come out because it should tell us whether or not we can sustain our debt by investing in the right things to be able to. For example, we know that Transnet had asked for 100 billion, they only got 40. They still need the balance. And I think the one thing that we are looking for in this budget is a way that the private sector can participate in co-funding some of these needs with the government. Right now, it's very difficult to get the private sector to co-fund some of the programs. And that is something that you must talk about. What methodology can we use to be able to take money from the private sector and to what we have in the public sector and be able to deliver on big projects that we need for growth and employment?
All right. We'll have to leave it there, but of course we'll talk more throughout this week about the budget, an important one, as we always say, but really is this year. That was Xhanti Payi, Senior Economist of PWC South Africa, looking at what's likely to come out of that budget speech on Wednesday and how the minister will actually balance or try to do a balancing act.